Hello everyone, welcome to this edition of Inside the Americas. Coming up in today's show, the Russia allegations zeroing in on Donald Trump Jr. More on his private messages with WikiLeaks from his presidential father's winning campaign on the way. The election in Chile is on this weekend. We will look at the hot-button issue of the indigenous Mapuche, literally the people of the land. And the number of homeless in the western United States is skyrocketing as a housing shortage pushes rents through the roof. But first, the investigation into the Trump campaign's alleged collusion with Russia turned up a notch this week, targeting U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions. He is now blaming his memory for failing to mention during a previous hearing that he did witness Trump aides discussing Russia. Speaking to Congress this week, a defiant Sessions said he never lied under oath about Russia's interference in the campaign. He tried to explain away apparent contradictions in his public statements by saying sleep deprivation and the chaos of the election made him forget. Well, that comes as the Russia allegations also pinpointed President Trump's son. This week, Donald Jr. released a series of private messages he exchanged with WikiLeaks during and after the 2016 race, hours after American magazine The Atlantic first broke the story.
How ironic, tweets Donald Trump Jr., accusing a congressional committee of leaking his email exchanges with WikiLeaks. The US president's eldest son released what he said was the entire chain of his messages with the group during and after last year's election campaign. The correspondence started in September 2016, with the site warning him of a new anti-Trump group investigating the candidate's ties with the Kremlin. Trump Jr. replied that he wasn't aware of the movement, but that he would ask around. In early October, WikiLeaks sent an article about Hillary Clinton criticizing its founder, Julian Assange. Trump Jr. asked about rumors of hacked emails from Clinton's campaign manager's account. WikiLeaks didn't respond, but days later, it started rolling out the stolen emails. Information that US federal investigators believe was provided by Russian military intelligence. The Trump campaign began attacking his rival over the issue.
The Hillary Clinton documents released today by WikiLeaks make more clear than ever just how much is at stake in this election.
What I saw over the last few days coming out, and what I've seen in the WikiLeaks stuff coming out, it hasn't been a fair fight. I see positions, I see what Hillary tells people in stump speeches, I see what she says in her emails.
Trump Jr. already faced a media storm after it came to light that he had met with a Russian government lawyer during the 2016 campaign. The latest revelations don't show Trump Jr. was actively involved in the leak of Clinton emails, but they're sure to increase calls in Congress to have him testify publicly as part of the ongoing investigations to see whether Trump's campaign colluded in any way with the Moscow government.
Meanwhile, allegations of sexual harassment have reached into Washington this week. Republicans there are cranking up pressure to keep Roy Moore from being elected to the U.S. Senate. He's running for a seat in Alabama that was freed up by current Attorney General Jeff Sessions. But two women have now said Moore molested them in the 1970s when one was 14 and the other 16, and he was a local district attorney. Three other women say he pursued romantic relationships with them when he was in his 30s, and they were teenagers. And 6 women have accused former President George Herbert Walker Bush of inappropriate touching without their consent. Over a decade, the 41st president allegedly patted them all below the waist during photo shoots, sometimes with a joke about his favorite magician, David Copperfield. All but one of those cases is now ineligible under the time limits of state laws, and lawyers say it would be difficult to win a conviction against the former president, who suffers from a rare syndrome that mimics Parkinson's disease. Bush has issued repeated apologies through a spokesperson to anyone he offended. Well, more and more women are opening up about harassment in the wake of the assault allegations against U.S. movie producer Harvey Weinstein. That kicked off the hashtag #MeToo that's now gone global, with nearly half of those mentions coming from outside the United States. But it's still very present in Hollywood, where hundreds of people marched this week to support victims. Demonstrators gathered at the iconic Dolby Theatre in Hollywood, which hosts the Oscars, to draw attention to their cause. Last week, comedian Louis C.K. became the latest Hollywood figure to be felled by sex abuse allegations, following producer-director Brett Ratner, actor Kevin Spacey, and others. Next now to Chile, where this Sunday the country will hold presidential and legislative elections. There are 14 million voters in the country, including the indigenous Mapuche. Based in the south of Chile, the Mapuche, literally people of the land, have been fighting with the Chilean state to reclaim their lands for the past 2 centuries. Today, there are between 600,000 and 1 million members of these descendants of pre-Columbian civilizations. And with election day looming, their fate is high on the political agenda. Laurie Fachot and Martin van der Bosch report.
This farm going up in flames hit all the headlines here 4 years ago. The fire claimed the lives of 2 wealthy landowners. 11 people were accused of murder and terrorism. One of those is Jose. He's a leader of the Mapuche, an indigenous group in the south of Chile who are fighting to preserve their traditional way of life. After a year and a half in custody, Jose was exonerated 3 weeks ago.
You're a piece of Indian, son of a bitch, that's how the policeman spoke to me. There's no justice. There's nothing documented. They're empty accusations. It's all set up. But because here there's no justice, the judges condemn us, even though they can see there's no evidence.
Jose's isn't an isolated case. Chile has been called out by the United Nations for its excessive use of force against the Mapuches. This organisation defends indigenous rights and say they see every day how true the UN's comments are.
When these cases reach court for an oral trial, the courts realize that the evidence presented by public prosecutors and police obtained via anti-terrorist laws is not sufficient to prove the participation of the accused. So this is absolutely clear that it is a process of criminalization, and the aim is to punish people who are fighting for their rights by detaining them.
For the Mapuches, fighting for their rights means reclaiming their ancestral lands. These fields of eucalyptus trees and rapeseed plantations stretching as far as the eye can see. Today, other people farm these fertile lands, which were once part of the Mapuches' territory. Victor Quepil is a Lonco, a Mapuche chief. He gives us a rare interview here, in a space sacred for his community.
We're the Mapuche community. Back in time, this territory was the Mapuche's land. We were kicked out and thrown off our land. That's what we're trying to fix. The big agricultural companies have to leave so we can see how to recover, for example, our native trees, and to get the land back to how it was.
Indigenous people account for 10% of the Chilean population. That's a significant number that electoral candidates need to get on board. But people here don't even recognise the Chilean state, and no one will be voting next Sunday.
All right, we'll leave you now with our number of the week, 18. There are 18% more homeless people in California, Oregon, and Washington than there were just 2 years ago. American voters in those western states have approved more than $8 billion in spending to try and tackle homelessness, but the numbers of people without shelter or living in makeshift dwellings like their cars continues to rise. Shona Bhattacharya has more now on the main culprit of the crisis, a housing shortage that's pushed rents far too high.
Jose Caro has hit rough patches before, but this time he can't seem to get back on the rails. He and his girlfriend live in a recreational vehicle with no bathroom or running water. Like 44% of homeless Americans, he has a job, but it's not enough to put a roof over their heads.
It's not our choice, really. You're forced into some things in life where you have to do them and not make decisions, just do them.
Jose points to rising housing costs to explain his predicament.
So we started renting at $750 a little room. It was a little house. And then he raised it to $1,200, and he wanted to go to $1,500. There's no way.
Jose's former landlord raised the rent because he could. Across the West Coast, the economy is booming, and high-skilled jobs are drawing in talent. At the same time, those who are left out are left on the street.
I got, economically zero unemployment in my city, and I got thousands of homeless people that actually are working and just can't afford housing.
More than 10 cities and municipal regions across California, Oregon, and Washington state have declared a state of emergency since 2015. There are now 168,000 homeless people across the region, of whom 105,000 are unsheltered, sleeping outside, in a train or bus station, or in a car. That's an 18% jump in 2 years. Housing initiatives exist, but they are too few and far between to address the growing crisis.
We have like 8 units each month, and maybe 1,600 people that would qualify for them. So that tells you a little bit about the need.
Across the city of Seattle, some 400 tent camps have sprouted under highways, in lots or along roads, but they can never stay for long. Police regularly clear the makeshift neighborhoods with the support of local residents who point to the discomfort of living alongside a public health crisis. Jose would gladly leave his vehicle for a real home. In the meantime, he needs to find someone with a truck to tow his makeshift house to yet another location.
Well, that's it for this Inside the Americas. We'll see you again next time for all the news from north to south.
Across Africa, presented by Georgia Calvin Smith.